She smiled as she handed me the plate and said, "Let me make it up to you." There were people everywhere, laughter in the background, and the smell of grilled meat floating through the air. But in that moment, all I could focus on was the pale pink shrimp sitting on the edge of the dish. I froze. I'm dangerously allergic to shellfish. One bite would have sent me to the ER, and I was pregnant. No one else knew yet, not even Daniel. But something about her smile made the back of my neck prickle. I looked down at the plate again, then back up at my sister-in-law, Brielle. She was still smiling, too brightly. I didn't eat the shrimp. Colton did. That moment, that plate, that smile, everything spiraled from there. But to understand what happened, I need to take you back. Back to when I first met her. I married Daniel 7 years ago. He was steady, soft-spoken, and the kind of man who didn't just listen, he heard. I loved everything about our marriage, except for one thing. His sister, Brielle. At first, I tried to see the best in her. She was charismatic, always the loudest in the room, and people naturally gravitated toward her. But it didn't take long before the mask slipped. Beneath the charm was someone territorial, manipulative, and deeply jealous of anyone who took her brother's attention. From the beginning, she made it her mission to remind me of every woman Daniel had ever dated. She'd casually drop their names into conversations when I was around, talking about how well they were doing, how she had coffee with one last week, how Daniel could have done so well with her if he hadn't rushed into things. She even once joked in front of his parents that she still thought he should have married her best friend instead of me. I laughed it off at the time. Daniel told her to stop. She didn't. Then came the Instagram obsession. She didn't follow me, but she was always the first to watch my stories. If a male friend from college left a comment, she'd send screenshots to Daniel with notes like, "You okay with this?" Or, "She's putting herself out there a little too much." We laughed about it, but it stung knowing she was always looking for cracks to wedge herself between us. The moment Daniel proposed, everything changed. His parents were thrilled. My family cried. Friends cheered. But Brielle sat still, arms crossed, lips tight. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked out of the party. Daniel followed her outside, only to come back later looking worn down. "She says she's hurt," he told me. She thought she deserved to know before everyone else. Later that night, I received a message from her. It wasn't congratulatory. It was laced with passive-aggressive advice, how I should treat her brother, how I needed to remember. She'd always be the woman in his life first. It unsettled me. I didn't reply, and I knew that silence would offend her more than anything else. After that, she became colder, more calculated. She still involved herself in our wedding preparations, hovering at bridal showers and dress fittings. She criticized everything, from the floral colors to the centerpieces, under the guise of just being honest. She mocked my choices openly, once calling my table decor cheap in front of my future mother-in-law. That was the last straw. One afternoon, while standing in the reception hall with my dress clutched in one hand, I turned to her and said the words I had held back for too long. "You're not invited anymore. I can't take your constant cruelty." She gasped like I had slapped her, then stormed out. Daniel backed me up. So did his mother. Still, I felt shaken. Because I knew. Someone like Brielle doesn't just walk away. She waits. She plans. And I was right. She showed up to our wedding anyway in black. I had chosen soft pinks and ivory for the wedding, a garden celebration in late spring, delicate and light, everything I had dreamed of. But when Brielle walked in, it felt like a storm cloud had entered the room. She was dressed in a floor-length black gown, complete with a veil. A veil. She looked like she was mourning a death, not attending a wedding. And in her mind, maybe she was. Guests turned and stared. Some whispered. A few chuckled, thinking it was a misguided attempt at drama. But I saw the glint in her eyes. She was daring me to react, to ruin my own wedding by losing control. I didn't. I smiled. I let her linger like a shadow in the corner. Daniel's mother, Martha, tried to keep her distance, but I saw her jaw clench every time Brielle opened her mouth. She didn't stop at the dress. She floated around the reception like a ghost from some forgotten tragedy, telling people how sad she was to lose her brother, how hard it was to watch him replace her with someone else. She laughed bitterly during our first dance and made snide comments when I cut the cake. Daniel finally walked over to her table and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "This ends now, Brielle. If you can't be here with joy, then leave." Still, she didn't. She just smiled and said, "I have every right to celebrate or grieve how I want." It was Daniel's father, Howard, who eventually stepped in. Calm but firm, he walked her to the edge of the garden and said something low in her ear. She didn't argue. She just turned, veil swaying behind her, and left. I thought that was the end. I really did. After the wedding, I gave birth to our son Lucas. He had Daniel's eyes and my mother's dimpled chin. Holding him felt like holding the future, something clean and untouchable. I didn't want Brielle anywhere near him. I told Daniel that clearly. At first, he resisted. "She's still family," he said. But after everything, he understood. He saw what I saw. Brielle wasn't just toxic. She was dangerous in ways we hadn't fully grasped yet. But then things changed, or so I thought. 2 years after our wedding, Brielle had a miscarriage. She had been dating a man named Colton, a kind man, quieter than she was, always looking at her like she was fire and he was just trying not to get burned. The miscarriage devastated her. She vanished from social media, stopped coming to family dinners, and when she did show up months later, she looked hollow. That's the only word I have for it. Hollow. Out of pity, I softened. I allowed her to visit Lucas. She'd sit with him in the living room, reading to him or building puzzles, and for a while, it seemed like the woman I'd feared had vanished. Even Daniel said so. "Maybe this humbled her," he whispered one night. I wanted to believe it, but it didn't take long before the old Brielle began to resurface. Subtle at first, offhand comments about how tired I looked, how messy the house was, how lucky I was that Daniel still found me attractive post-baby. Then more direct, she started bringing up her own struggles at every opportunity. Every visit became a monologue about her pain, her disappointments, her ex-friends, her unfair bosses. Everyone had wronged her. She was always the victim. Colton eventually proposed. I was surprised. We all were. And even more surprising, we weren't invited to the wedding. Daniel confronted her. "Why are we not invited?" Her answer stunned me. "Because I don't want her ruining my day like I ruined hers," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "I wore black, remember? I know how petty women can be. You might do the same." It was absurd. I had done nothing to her. Nothing. And yet somehow I had become the villain in her script. That night, Daniel sat me down and said, "This has gone too far." He was right, but we had no idea how much further she was willing to go. After that conversation, Daniel spoke with his parents. They were just as stunned, especially since they had been planning to pay for part of Brielle's wedding. But when they heard what she had said to us, accusing me of plotting revenge, of being some jealous monster, they were done. Martha said it flat out. If she wants to exclude her own brother over paranoia, she can pay for her wedding herself. And they meant it. No financial support, no attendance, nothing. That pushed Brielle into full meltdown. She called Daniel sobbing, saying I had turned the whole family against her. She accused me of manipulating everyone, of being so polished it's scary, like I was some kind of evil genius hiding behind soft smiles. Daniel didn't even try to reason with her. He just told her, "You've made your choices. Live with them." But in true Brielle fashion, she didn't stay angry for long. When she needed something, she knew how to play sweet. A week later, she called me directly. Her tone was softer, apologetic. She said she had been under stress, that planning a wedding was harder than she thought, that she just wanted peace. "I want my brother at my side," she said. "And you too. Your family." It sounded rehearsed, but I could hear the tremble behind it. And maybe, foolishly, I believed she meant it. I convinced Daniel to attend the wedding. "Let's just be done with the drama," I said. "Go. Be polite. Then leave." We went. It was fine. Normal. Maybe too normal. Brielle smiled too much. Colton looked strained. But there was no scene, no sabotage. I started to think maybe, just maybe, she was trying to change. 6 months later, she showed up at our doorstep with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes. Colton had left her. She didn't give details, just that they'd been fighting, trying to have a baby, and it had all fallen apart. I didn't ask questions. I just told her she could stay a few nights upstairs. She moved in like she owned the space. And suddenly, every day was about her sadness, her resentment, her bad luck. She spoke like a woman the world had targeted. But beneath it, I sensed something sharper, something calculating. She began to observe me, not just casually, closely, asking where I was going, what I was doing, why I always left for the gym so early. I told her I liked to work out before the office. Sometimes I'd bring my work clothes with me to change after. No big deal. But she looked at me with this tight little smile, like she didn't believe a word of it. One night at dinner, my mother-in-law was telling a story about a friend who had divorced her husband after catching him cheating and walked away with half his assets. Brielle cut in. "Wait, Daniel. Did you and Lauren ever sign a prenup?" The table fell silent. I stared at her. Daniel just blinked. "No," he said. "We didn't. We both do well. We trust each other." Brielle laughed under her breath. "Brave," she muttered. "A lot of people get blindsided." I tried to ignore it, but then she looked right at me and said, "You do carry a lot of outfit changes, Lauren. Are you sure that gym of yours isn't just a cover?" Daniel's fork clattered onto his plate. I stood up. "Excuse me." She raised her eyebrows. "I'm just saying, as his sister, it's my job to protect him." Daniel slammed his napkin down. "Brielle, enough. You don't get to accuse my wife of cheating because you're unhappy in your own life." She flinched. "And don't you ever question whether Lucas is my son again," he added, voice trembling. "You're not a mother. And honestly, after today, I hope you never become one." Her mouth fell open. Everyone sat frozen. Then, without a word, Brielle stood up and stormed off down the hallway. That was the last time we spoke to her for over a year. Until Daniel's birthday. Until the plate. After that dinner, we cut her off completely. No calls. No visits. No updates. Martha and Howard understood. They had seen the shift in Daniel, usually calm and composed, now raw with anger and betrayal. "She's crossed too many lines," Martha said, and no one disagreed. For a while, life was peaceful, quiet, and then, one late September afternoon, I found out I was pregnant again. It wasn't planned, but when I saw those 2 pink lines, something inside me stilled. It felt like life giving me another chance. Lucas was 5 now, curious, sensitive, always asking questions. I imagined him as a big brother, protective and sweet. Daniel was overjoyed. We both decided to keep it to ourselves until the right moment. That moment came during Daniel's birthday. His parents offered to throw a backyard party at their home in Boulder, complete with string lights, a catered lunch, and a homemade cake from his favorite bakery. We invited close friends, a few colleagues, and family. Everyone knew it would be special, but no one expected Brielle to show up. She wasn't invited. We didn't even know she was in town. But when she walked through the gate in a soft lavender dress, holding a bottle of wine and flashing a sheepish smile, my heart stopped. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened. She went straight to him, hugged him, whispered something in his ear. Then she turned to me. "Lauren," she said gently, "I'm so sorry for everything. I've been going to therapy. I'm not that person anymore." I nodded stiffly. She offered me nothing more. Just that smile. Martha pulled me aside and asked if I wanted her gone. "Say the word," she said. "I'll have Howard escort her out." "But Daniel," Ever the peacemaker, said no. Let's not turn this into another war. If she causes trouble, we'll deal with it. So I watched her. All day. She laughed too loudly, asked too many questions, made small, harmless jokes that felt like probes. But nothing crossed the line. She even complimented the decorations. The flowers are gorgeous, she said. You always had good taste, Lauren. It was during lunch that she approached me with a plate. I had just sat down, hands resting on my belly, when she walked over with a paper plate stacked with grilled vegetables, pasta salad, and shrimp. Thought I'd bring you something, she said, chipper. Wanted to make up for the past. Congratulations, by the way. I stared at the shrimp. I'm allergic, I said quietly. Oh, she said, blinking. I didn't know. She did. She absolutely did. It was a topic that came up every time we ordered food as a family. I had been rushed to urgent care once because of accidental cross-contamination. She knew. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. I was still staring at the plate when Colton walked by. Mind if I take that? He asked. I'm starving and I love shrimp. I hesitated, then handed it to him. Sure, I said, distracted. I'll grab something else. He walked off, smiling, already digging in. 5 minutes later, he collapsed. It started with coughing, then gagging. He doubled over, his face flushing deep red. People screamed. Someone called 911. Daniel rushed over. So did Brielle. She knelt beside him, shouting his name, panic rising in her voice. Then she looked up, eyes blazing, and pointed at me. What did you give him? She demanded. What was on that plate? I couldn't speak. I just stood there, watching Colton writhe, thinking that was meant for me. That shrimp, that smile, that apology. I didn't know how, but I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. She had poisoned the food, and she had handed it to me. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Guests cleared a path as paramedics rushed through the backyard. Colton was barely conscious, his lips pale, his hands trembling. They loaded him onto the stretcher, while Brielle wept beside him, clutching his hand like a woman halfway through a tragedy she hadn't expected to be real. But I stood frozen, cold, silent. My mind raced through the last 30 minutes, like a surveillance reel. The shrimp, her voice, that too sweet smile. I had almost eaten it. My unborn child and I. We were supposed to be the ones on that stretcher, not Colton. The police showed up shortly after. It was standard, they said. Anytime food poisoning leads to hospitalization, an investigation is launched. They asked questions, took photos, collected plates. I watched from a distance as an officer slipped the plate into an evidence bag, carefully sealing it. My stomach turned, not from pregnancy this time, but from dread. Daniel stood beside me, arms crossed, face hard. When the officer asked who had prepared the food, I hesitated, then spoke clearly. Brielle brought it to me. I didn't eat it. Colton did. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Martha and Howard stayed with us. They couldn't go home. Not after what had happened on their lawn. No one said it aloud, but we all knew what it meant. That something intentional may have happened, and that Brielle was at the center of it. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment Colton asked for the plate. How easily I handed it to him. How that one action might have saved my life and cost him his health. I was shaking when I opened my phone and started typing. I poured out everything. What happened, what I saw, what I knew deep down. I posted it anonymously online, thinking maybe if I said it aloud, the fear would loosen its grip. By morning, there were hundreds of comments, then thousands. People said I wasn't crazy, that my instincts were right, that someone like Brielle didn't just make mistakes, she made choices, malicious ones, calculated ones. Daniel found me sitting on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest. You didn't eat the food, he said gently. You're safe. The baby's safe. But I couldn't stop shaking. Colton isn't, I whispered. That was my plate. I gave it to him. What if? He knelt in front of me. You didn't know. You were trying to protect yourself. You weren't the one who poisoned it. We didn't talk to Brielle. She didn't call. But she stayed overnight at the hospital, refusing to leave Colton's side. The next day, Daniel met with his parents in the kitchen while I sat on the couch with Lucas, pretending everything was okay. It wasn't. My son looked up at me with his innocent eyes and asked, "Is Uncle Colton going to die?" I choked on my breath. "No, sweetheart. He's strong." Later that night, I told Daniel the full truth, that I believed she had meant to poison me, that I had caught the shrimp instantly because of my allergy, but Colton hadn't known. I also reminded him she had prepared that exact plate, handed it to me herself. Nothing about that moment had been casual. Howard sat still for a long time, then finally said, "There are cameras." "What?" "In the backyard. We have cameras facing the patio and garden. Installed them after last year's break-in." Daniel grabbed his father's phone, opened the security app, and pulled up the footage. We watched in silence. There it was, clear as day. Brielle approaching the buffet, selecting items, then carefully adding shrimp to a single plate, glancing over her shoulder, then walking directly toward me with it. No mistake, no accident, just intent. And now we had proof. Daniel didn't say a word after watching the video. He just stared at the screen, fists clenched, breathing shallow. The silence in the room was heavy, charged like the air before a thunderstorm. I didn't dare speak. Martha stood behind him, one hand over her mouth. Howard finally broke the silence. "We need to bring this to the police." I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt, but I felt something else too, relief. It wasn't just my word anymore. It wasn't just a gut feeling or a mother's instinct. We had proof. Actual, indisputable proof that Brielle had prepared that plate and handed it directly to me. Daniel downloaded the footage, transferred it to a USB, and drove to the police station with his father. I stayed home with Martha and Lucas. Every time the front door creaked or a phone buzzed, my stomach jumped. I kept glancing at Lucas playing with his toy cars, wondering what I would have told him if I hadn't noticed the shrimp. What if Colton hadn't taken the plate? What if, when Daniel came home 2 hours later, he looked like a man who'd walked through fire? "They're taking it seriously," he said. "The officer said it's enough to start a formal investigation, especially with what happened to Colton." That same night, we got the toxicology report. Colton had been poisoned with a compound commonly found in rodenticides, rat poison. Traces were found in his bloodstream, and symptoms matched. I nearly collapsed when I heard it. It wasn't just food poisoning. It was attempted poisoning with intent to harm. Brielle was contacted for questioning the next morning. She didn't even try to deny it. According to the detective, she broke down almost immediately, cried, sobbed, said she hadn't meant for any of this to happen, claimed she was overwhelmed, emotional, that she just wanted Lauren to spend a night in the hospital, to teach her a lesson. She swore she didn't know I was pregnant, said she only used a small amount, that it was harmless in low doses. Her words, harmless. Colton filed charges the same day, and then he filed for divorce. Brielle called Martha from the holding cell, begging her to come. She said she was scared, alone, that she needed her parents, now more than ever. And then she dropped her final bombshell. She was pregnant. For a moment, Martha wavered. I saw it in her eyes, the way her face paled, her hands trembling as she held the phone. But Howard's voice came steady behind her. "She could have killed your grandchild. That was it." They didn't go. Daniel didn't either. Brielle stayed in holding until her bail hearing. No one from our family showed up. And when her court date arrived, everything came out. The camera footage, the toxicology report, her confession, her motive. The judge was stern but clear. Attempted poisoning, tampering with food, reckless endangerment. She had committed multiple offenses, and the fact that she was pregnant did not absolve her. The judge said her child's future would be determined later, but her actions had consequences now. She was sentenced to prison. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't want to see her cry. I didn't want to hear her excuses. But Daniel did. He said Brielle stood there, trembling, mascara running down her cheeks, and when the sentence was read, she whispered. I didn't think she'd give it to him. I didn't think she'd actually hand the plate to someone else. Like that made it better. Like attempted murder was okay as long as it hit the right target. She tried to shift the blame to me, even at the end. But the truth was clear. She didn't care who got hurt. So long as I paid the price. Brielle went to prison. There were no appeals, no last-minute reversals, just silence. Her sentence wasn't long by legal standards, but it was long enough to ensure distance, long enough to give all of us space to breathe. In the months that followed, we tried to settle back into life. Lucas asked questions, of course. Where did Aunt Brielle go? Is Uncle Colton okay now? We answered with gentle truths. She made a dangerous mistake, I said one night, tucking him into bed. And now she's facing the consequences. Colton recovered slowly but fully. When he was ready, he filed for divorce and moved to a new city. But he stayed in touch. That surprised me. I thought he'd want to forget everything, erase the nightmare, but instead he chose connection. He came to Lucas's birthday. He sent cards on holidays. He even came to visit when our second child was born. I still carried guilt from that afternoon, the way I had handed him the plate. But when I finally got the courage to say it aloud, he just shook his head. You saved yourself and your baby. That's what matters. Our daughter was born on a bright morning in March. We named her Grace, and that's exactly what she brought into our lives. Grace, after everything broken. The first time Daniel held her, he cried. Real, silent tears that he didn't wipe away. I didn't think I could feel joy like this again, he whispered. Not after everything. I understood. The trauma didn't leave us immediately. For weeks, I couldn't eat anything unless I'd made it myself. I double-checked every ingredient label. I flinched when someone handed me food at a gathering. My OB suggested therapy, and I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night and imagine what could have happened. If I hadn't noticed the shrimp, if I'd taken a bite without thinking, if I'd trusted the smile on her face instead of listening to the twist in my gut. It terrified me, but it also taught me something, how close danger can be, even when it's wrapped in family ties and forced smiles. Martha and Howard tried to reconcile their own grief. Their daughter was in prison. Their son had nearly lost his wife and unborn child. But they didn't shrink from it. They stood beside us, supported us, loved us harder. We raised her, Martha said once, voice cracking. We can't undo that, but we can choose who we stand with now. Brielle sent one letter from prison. It arrived 6 months after the sentencing. The handwriting was neat, controlled, the message short. She apologized, said she had been blinded by jealousy and hormones, that she hoped we could forgive her someday for the baby's sake. I didn't reply. Daniel didn't read it. We stored it away with the police report and court documents, tucked deep in a drawer we never opened. Some stories don't need epilogues. Some doors deserve to stay closed. Now, every evening, as the sun dips behind the mountains, Lucas reads to Grace on the porch swing. He's gentle with her, careful in ways that make my heart ache. And sometimes as I watch them, I think about how easily all of this could have been stolen. How one woman's bitterness almost burned down the life we built. But it didn't, because I said no, because I trusted my instinct, because this time I didn't try to keep the peace by staying quiet. And that changed everything.